everybody. So we need to talk about the Carolina Hurricanes in the offseason that they have had, because I think it's been one of the strangest off seasons that I can remember for a team in quite some time. And I really don't know if this team's gotten better, gotten worse, stayed the same, like what Carolina is going to be like next year, because they've had so much roster turnover and so many roster changes that you usually don't see out of a team as good as the Hurricanes were last year, as they were one of the best teams in the league. So we're going to take a look here. We're going to delve into the moves that Carolina has made and try and figure out how good or not this team is going to be next season, and if any of these moves made the team better or if any of these moves were really kind of a step back. But before we get into it, I just ask that you please hit that thumbs up button and subscribe. If you haven't, it helps the channel so much and is greatly appreciated. But let's get into it. So let's take a look here at the additions and subtractions of the Carolina Hurricanes, and this is a lot. I mean, these are the major ones. There were more that I could have put on here, but there were just so many that, you know, these were, I think, the biggest, going to have the biggest impact on the NHL roster as far as adds and subtractions go. But I mean, we're looking at a team that is going to have a completely new set of goaltenders next season. They just lost their highest scoring defenseman in Dougie Hamilton. They've lost some forward depth as well that's going to be tough to replace. Overall, it's been a strange offseason. It started with the Nadalkovic trade. It continued through free agency, and I just don't really know what to think about this team at this point. I mean, let's look at who they've brought in. They've added Frederick Anderson in goal, who's coming off a bad year in Toronto, but will also have, you know, a better defense playing in front of him this year than he's probably ever had before in his career. Certainly better than anything he ever had with the Maple Leafs. They traded for Ethan Bear, which is actually, I think, a really nice move for them. They signed Ian Cole. For some reason, brought in Tony DeAngelo. We'll talk more about that later. Antti Raanta is their new backup goaltender. Again, big question mark there. He had a lot of injury issues, did not have a good season last year, but in the past has shown the potential to be a really good 1B. Josh Lavo comes in. Brendan Smith comes in. Kind of depth moves there. Derek Stepan. I mean, they already have Jordan Staal in that leadership role. Like, what do they really need Stepan for? I mean, he's someone who's, you know, really fallen off. Another weird move, in my opinion. But those are their additions to the lineup, and there are quite a few. Their subtractions are probably even bigger. Dougie Hamilton left for New Jersey in free agency. That's a huge loss. Alex Nadalkovic traded to Detroit in probably the strangest trade of this offseason. Now, I do understand that there was some kind of behind-the-scenes stuff going on there that led to that, but nonetheless, Nadalkovic was a Calder finalist last year. Just to basically give him away for a mid-round draft pick is very interesting. Peter Marasic is gone. James Reimer is gone. So they have none of their three goaltenders from last season returning. Warren Fogle was traded to Edmonton. Brock McGinn is now in Pittsburgh. Yanni Hakanpää is now in Dallas. Cedric Paquette is now in Montreal. And Jake Bean is now in Columbus. So this team's had a lot of, you know, players, and some very important players gone now, leave this roster. And I don't know, it's really interesting. I mean, Carolina is a team that I've grown very, very fond of over the last few years, but I was not expecting this much turnover for a team that literally was competing for the President's Trophy last year. Carolina was one of the best teams in the entire NHL last season. Generally, when you get teams in that situation, they try and keep the group together. And you don't usually see them make tons and tons of roster changes because they want that group to stick together and get another shot at a Stanley Cup. Obviously, you know, the young core like Aho and Svechnikov and Slavin, those guys are all still there. That young core has been, you know, retained, obviously. But around that core, like, almost everything has changed. And I think, one of the biggest things is the goaltending. You look at last year, they had Nadalkovic, Marasic, and Reimer. Marasic had great numbers when he was healthy, but missed a large portion of the year. Nadalkovic took over as a starting goaltender, had a phenomenal season, and obviously was a Rookie of the Year finalist, like I mentioned. Reimer is a okay number 3. He came in and held down when he needed to when Marasic was out, but it was really Nadalkovic and Marasic leading the way with Reimer as a safety net. Well, now this year they've got completely new goaltending. Freddie Anderson is the starter and Antti Raanta is the backup, and I believe he's not on the listed here, but I believe Alex Lyon was brought in to be their third goaltender. So, you've got a completely new set of goaltenders for this season. And is their new set of goaltenders better than what they had last season? I mean, I think at best it's a wash. I mean, Frederick Anderson is coming off a really down year with Toronto. Obviously, now Marasic is in Toronto. Now, what I will say, though, is that I do think Anderson is a great candidate to have a huge bounce-back season this year. I do not think Frederick Anderson is going to be as bad this season as he was last year. And the other thing is that he is going to have such a significantly better defense in front of him in Carolina than he did in Toronto. Carolina has been one of the best defensive teams in the league for the past few years. Toronto is definitely not that, and Anderson is definitely going to get the boost of that. And likewise, I think you're going to see Marasic's numbers drop in Toronto now that he doesn't have the Hurricanes defense in front of him. I don't think you're going to see the same numbers from Peter Marasic in Toronto, but that's beside the point. The point is, what Nadalkovic, Marasic, and Reimer were able to do last season for Carolina, can Freddie Anderson and Antti Raanta repeat that? Replace and repeat that. I mean, I don't think it's anywhere of a improvement in goal, because I don't think Anderson is going to be at the level that maybe Nadalkovic was last season. Can Anderson replace Marasic? Yes. That's probably maybe even a slight improvement with Anderson. At the very least, a wash between those two. Is Antti Raanta an improvement over James Reimer? When he's healthy, yes, I think he is. But what they didn't replace was Nadalkovic. Nadalkovic put up some insane numbers last year, had an incredible season. I don't think Anderson is going to be at that level. I really don't. And obviously Raanta's the backup. He's not. I think that all in all, there's probably a slight downgrading goal here. I think it could be a wash. It could end up being just very similar to what it was last year, but that's if Freddie Anderson has a very good season. I think it's most likely going to be a slight step back in goal, and I think it's because of Nadalkovic leaving. That's going to be a big, big loss for this team. Marasic and Reimer, replaceable, and I think they were replaced. But Nadalkovic, that's a big loss for this team. Defense. Dougie Hamilton, obviously not there anymore. Went to New Jersey in free agency. There's no one player that was available that was going to be able to single-handedly replace Dougie Hamilton. But they brought in Ethan Bear in the trade involving Warren Fogle from Edmonton, which actually I think is a nice pickup. Ethan Bear is a solid defenseman. Is he a top pair guy? No. Is he a middle pair guy? I think he can be a solid middle pair guy. Certainly, if he's on your bottom pair, you're deep on the back end. Ian Cole, good veteran guy. I think he kind of replaces Yanni Hakanpää. Hakanpää was kind of that bottom pair, bigger, physical, defensive defenseman. Ian Cole can take that role fine. And then Tony DeAngelo, this is a complete head scratcher of a move, complete wild card of a move for me. Now, I think Tony DeAngelo was brought in to potentially try and replace some of the offensive output that Dougie Hamilton is leaving behind, because Hamilton was by far their best offensive defenseman, and Carolina doesn't really have that many other offensive defensemen. They don't have other guys that are going to put up big point totals. Hamilton had defensive deficiencies, but could put serious points on the board. Tony DeAngelo, well, I think has a lot more deficiencies, but can also put points on the board. Now, for that to happen, he needs to keep his mouth shut and his attitude in check, and he actually needs to be on the ice, because we all know what happened that led to him basically not playing almost all of last season. Now, that's a wild card move. DeAngelo could low-key be a 40-point D-man for this team if he stays healthy, if he keeps, his attitude in check, and if he's not a locker room problem. A lot of things have to go right for DeAngelo to really work out. But if he does, that could be a low-key big addition for this Hurricanes team. It also could completely blow up in their faces. He could destroy that locker room and, become a major problem like he was in New York. Brendan Smith, basically a depth addition. Jake Bean, kind of a young guy. I think it's interesting that they traded him away. They drafted him. They developed him for a number of years, let him stay in the minors for a long time. Really, then last year, he kind of broke through into the NHL and played some more, NHL games and got some good NHL time, and they trade him this offseason. So I don't know if something happened there where they don't think he's ever going to be, what they thought he was, or if they saw something in his game that they didn't like and was thought maybe it's better to get rid of him now. I don't know what exactly happened there, but I just think it's interesting that they would just trade away a young defenseman like that, who is kind of just breaking into their lineup. But nonetheless, there's been a lot of changes on the back end. Hamilton is out, Hakanpää is out, Bean is out, and Bear, Cole, DeAngelo, and Smith are in. So obviously the depth guys kind of wash out, but there's no real replacing Dougie Hamilton. And then, obviously even in the forward group, Warren Foegele, that's a loss out of your bottom six. Brock McGinn, that's a versatile winger that is definitely a loss. Cedric Paquette, I don't think he was kind of a fourth line / extra forward. He's not a huge loss in my opinion, but McGinn and Foegele are definitely losses out of that lineup. And the only forwards that they've brought in are Levo and Stepan, and those are definitely both downgrades over Foegele and McGinn. So I don't really think there's any area of the game that I look at the Carolina Hurricanes and think that they've gotten better. Now, have they gotten worse? I think you could make a case for them taking a slight step back. Again, we don't know about the goaltending, if that's going to end up just being a wash or if it's going to be a step back. Defensively, I definitely think there's been a little bit of a step back. And offensively, or at least as far as their forward group goes, I think that there's just a little bit lack of depth. Now, they've lost some depth compared to what they had last season. So, all in all, with these moves, I don't know. It's been, again, this is a team that I've liked, but it's been a very strange offseason. There's been a lot of changes, a lot of roster turnover, and I honestly can't say I think that Carolina's roster is better heading into this season than what it was heading into last season. I really don't think it's better. I think Carolina is still definitely going to be a good team. They should make the playoffs. They have a good enough roster and a good enough young group of talented core pieces that they should be a playoff team. But I don't think they're going to be better than they were last season. I think at best this year will be similar and be kind of a wash. And I think most likely there's going to be a slight step back with the Carolina Hurricanes. So that's just my opinion. It's been a weird offseason. I really don't know what to expect from this team. It's going to be really interesting to see them hit the ice and actually see them in action next year. But I think a lot of their moves, they've lost a lot. Nadalkovic is a big loss. Losing all of your goaltenders, that's a big loss, especially losing a starter. Really two starters in Marasic and Nadalkovic. Losing Dougie Hamilton, there was really no replacing that on the back end, and losing that depth up front. I guess one thing would be is if, they have some young players maybe waiting in the wings that get a chance to earn an NHL roster spot now, especially in that forward group, maybe on that third or fourth line. If they have maybe a surprise come up in training camp who actually is really, really good and earns a spot, that might, help this team, stay at the level that they were at last year. But all in all, I think more likely than not, the Carolina Hurricanes have taken a slight step back this offseason, And I don't know if we're going to see a team next year that's competing for the President's Trophy. I certainly think we're still going to see a good team. I certainly think we're going to see a playoff team, but I don't think they're going to be up there with that President's Trophy level of teams like they were last season. I just think there was a little bit of a step back this offseason, but that's just my opinion. Like, comment, share, subscribe, follow on social media. All those links are down in the description. If you'd like to further support the channel, the links to our Patreon merchandise store, donation link, and channel memberships are in the description as well. Keep spreading the word about this channel. Let's keep this thing growing. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll talk to you guys soon.